damn, does anybody care? This planet's empty, I see no signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Out the Coop Live. This is Out the Coop Live, brought to you by Raging Chicken Media, everybody. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press, Raging Chicken Media, and the podcast Out the Coop. As you may or may not know, we have a regular podcast every Friday where I talk to Sean Kitchen, our capital muckraker-in-chief, and that usually goes live around 10:30 a.m. on Fridays. That's always a little bit more hit and miss about when the start time is. Sometimes Sean's a little slow getting up in the morning, but you know how that works. But on tonight's Out the Coop Live, we are talking higher education organizing during the coronavirus pandemic. As the beginning of the school year draws ever closer, colleges and universities have been struggling with how to go back to school to keep students, teachers, and staff community members safe. Look, I really feel for the people who have to make these decisions at a time when the federal government is almost completely devoid of help for colleges and universities in terms of clear, transparent, and evidence-based guidelines on the one hand, and financial assistance to enact the necessary safety measures on the other. And to make matters worse, some university administrations have their heads in the sand, relying upon magical thinking and wishful thinking. You know, you've heard me say it before, like my university, Kutztown University, is occupied by just such an administration. And just this afternoon, everybody, just so you're cued in, so if you see me get a little kind of heated quickly on this one, the president of Kutztown University, Kenneth Hawkinson, went live with a video basically saying he's doubling down on back to school for in-face instruction because all you need to defeat the coronavirus with is fortitude and grit. Yeah, that's right. Fortitude and grit, everybody. Well, the pandemic shutdown has also posed challenges for activists and organizers who have had to shift strategies and tactics as well. As regular listeners to Out the Coop podcast know, last spring I began working with a group of students, faculty, staff, and community members on a project called the Healthy Campus Bill of Rights. The initial project set out to demand 1, a healthy working and learning environment, 2, campus investments in the financial health of our community, and 3, a campus infrastructure, changes to the campus infrastructure to meet the challenges of the climate crisis. Now the Healthy Campus Bill of Rights has really had to shift to deal with the most pressing issue before us, Kutztown University administration's insistence on returning to face-to-face classes in the fall, despite rising coronavirus cases and the fact that 9 out of 14 Pasha universities have gone to mostly online classes in the fall. Not to mention, all of their quote-unquote plans about returning in the fall read more like a PR document than they do any kind of practical guides of how they plan on actually keeping people safe. So we've definitely got stories to tell about that. On tonight's show, we're talking to guests who are organizing in higher education in the middle of this pandemic. You're invited to join the conversation by calling in through the Podbean app, and you can comment through the app, or you can comment on our live YouTube stream, and I'll try to be going back and forth between the screens to take those comments. My guests tonight are Tabitha Bernstein-Danis. Tabitha, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You got it. Tabitha is an assistant professor of special education at Kutztown University. She's a delegate to ABSCUFS, is the faculty union, the ABSCUFS Legislative Assembly, and the KU and State ABSCUFS Social Justice Committee chair. And we also welcome Dana Morrison. Dana, how are you? Dana, you there?
I'm here.
There you go. Okay, great. Excellent. Dana is an assistant professor at Westchester University of Pennsylvania. She is the co-chair of the ABSCUF Social Justice Committee at Westchester, and she is a member of the Public Higher Education Workers, a.k.a. FEW. Did I get that right, the pronunciation, FEW? Yeah, FEW. It's kind of like, whew, yeah, we did it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that is the Public Higher Education Workers. They're a network of faculty, students, and staff working to organize for a fully funded, free, liberatory public higher education. And then we've got Madeline Ochabila. Madeline, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you could join us, Madeline. Madeline is a student at Villanova University, and she's a regional organizer for United Students Against Sweatshops, better known as USAS. She has worked on international solidarity campaigns, particular campaigns that have aimed to hold big sports brands like Nike accountable to their factory workers who make collegiate apparel. USAS is also having a virtual summer conference the weekend of August 22nd and 23rd, which I'm definitely going to be asking Madeline about. Tell us a little bit about this. So it's an opportunity for students to learn from different organizing workshops, and we'll have the opportunity to connect with many other student organizers across the country. The conference is open to all students, not just USAS members, and you can register at USAS website, USAS, that's USAS.org. So welcome everybody to the show. I appreciate you being here tonight. So I also want to give a message to everyone who's joined in the show, who's who's joined in for the call-in show. If you're joining, you're listening to the Podbean app, there should be a little call-in button at the bottom of your screen. I would like to start off the show talking a little bit with each of our guests first, and then I'll let you know probably in about 15, 20 minutes or so that if you got some calls, you got some comments that you want to come in, you're welcome to call into the show. You have questions for me, or even just comments or words of support or questions for anybody else that's on the show tonight. That would be awesome. You can also use the comment feature here in Podbean. And I'll tell you this is something, this is totally 100% self-promotional stuff at this point, but I also find on the Podbean app, at the very bottom of the app, there's this little gift icon. You can click on the gift icon. If you want to help support the show, you can click on that gift icon and you can get these little things called golden beans. It is the corniest thing in the world. It's like fantasy world. It's like, here we are having some sort of, I don't know, fairy tale about podcasting, but you can go down there, you can purchase little gifts that'll help support the show. So without further ado, I want to kind of get into this. So one of the things that I think I want to start, Madeline, if I could, with you. Now, because you're coming at this as a student organizer who's not just working with, say, just students at Villanova, but you've been working with some, I know from talking to you kind of before the show and before that you've worked with other students kind of across the country and with some USAS across the country. So I'm just curious for you and other students, particularly with an organization like USAS that has been so, focused on, say, the in-person organizing, the day-to-day kind of a building of power at different college campuses. What has that been like for an organization like USAS to have to kind of shift gears in the midst of this pandemic?
Yeah, I feel like you kind of said it, like how USAS is very dependent on this face-to-face connection, because how we organize is through, I guess how like all organizing is done is through relationships with other people, connecting our different struggles together, and how we all relate to a certain issue is how like basically we start and win campaigns. So in light of the pandemic, it's definitely been hard for me to just connect with my group that I have on campus. Zoom has become our best friend, I would say, not just for Villanova students, but also for Kutztown, who I am working with currently. So I think for me, it's been like, it made me see how important it is to have that face-to-face connection, whether or not it's through a screen, because just working with Kutztown, Kutztown and like the experience that they've been having, it's easier for someone to like reject someone or just not respond to them if it's via text or email, because it's like there's no face-to-face connection, and therefore there's no relationship built, there's no foundation. So I would say it's harder, but it's also challenging us to think of how can we be more creative, how can we be more strategic and efficient with our time and energy, because like reaching out to someone so many times, it might not be worth it for someone on a certain campaign, but for other campuses it might be worth it. So it's definitely, we're still growing as an organizer in this time. I feel like I'm still growing to see like what works and what doesn't, and like how can we be flexible in that way, because these times have proven to us that it can be very uncertain, and like even with like school openings and like schools closing down again, like you said, past few schools have like rescinded their opening plan and have gone fully online, how things can change like so quickly. So I feel like as an organizer, it just made me value more about like how can we be more creative in the ways that we connect with other people.
And what's been interesting, I'm hearing, both feedback from students and hearing you make this kind of pitch directly to as well to students at Kutztown University. It's interesting. There's this kind of a certain kind of return to brass tacks. I mean, USAS has always been an organization that has been close to the labor movement and understands, or privileges, I should say, not understands, but privileges that kind of face-to-face organizing. But instead of kind of, where you saw a real glorification of, say, social media organizing or online organizing, even now when we're confronted with a situation where we can't do that face-to-face, I mean, you've had multiple phone calls, right? You end up using the phone a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Just through text and kind of discussions, through kind of helping facilitate kind of building that organizing culture. That's been really interesting to see.
Yeah, I feel like it's not just like, now you mention it is the phone a lot, but also like computer. As a student organizer with USAS, we have like put on different conferences and like trainings, like you mentioned, like the one coming up in August, and now like seeing how we have to go virtual and have to convert all of the trainings and all the different like meetings that we usually have in person, how we can translate that to a virtual space is very interesting. Like I just had a call with one of the organizers at Kutztown, and we're talking about a training and how like we want to have a training at Kutztown, and we were talking about how can we make this like engaging and how should we structure this. And so there's a training that USAS has, like a workshop that we usually run, and it has like different parts to it. And so now we were kind of discussing how can we convert this to a PowerPoint presentation, and like it's because we're not going to have that face-to-face, like the in-person thing where you can engage with those that who like is participating in the workshop. So now we have to like go to Zoom and like find out the different interactive features that they have, and like how do we utilize like virtual space in an organizing context. It's like something that I'm learning right now, and I think a lot of organizers are learning right now, and that includes like Zoom and like you said, social media. Mm-hmm. But social media I feel like has been there for like a while, but now we have to think of like how differently we can use that. But yeah.
Oh, very cool, very cool. I mean, and Dana, I want to turn to you now. So there's a couple things that are going through my mind, and I mean, I've wanted to talk to you and looking for, I've said this to you, I think, kind of offline or kind of off air, that, I've wanted to have you on, find some way to get you on the podcast for a while. So I'm so psyched that you're on tonight. Yeah, but I mean, I remember like I first kind of learned of you like back during the strike in 2016, which I believe at that point you were still an adjunct. Is that correct?
Yes, I was an adjunct until January 2018. So that was about my 4th or 5th year as an adjunct at Westchester.
Yeah, it was like, I just remember that's when I was like, hey, now there you go. Now we have another organizer down there. So here's the two things that are going through my mind is like, on the one hand, now Westchester University, also part of the state system of higher education, was the first university in the state system to decide that, nope, we're going kind of mostly primarily online. Right. So I'm curious about that from that perspective of what that's been like on that campus, and thinking about that shift to the fall, both in terms of, say, just going online in terms of classes, but also at the level of, say, organizing. So that's in the one camp. But then the second part, your work with the public higher education workers, which is kind of like a much more expansive, kind of like community-based unionism in many ways.
Yeah.
That is also faced with similar kinds of challenges, some of the ones that kind of Madeline was talking about. So I wonder if you could just kind of walk us through those two spaces that you're doing this work in.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about it in that way, because I join these weekly calls with Few, and if anyone is interested in joining, they're open to anyone who's interested in organizing in higher ed. They happen every Wednesday afternoon. So look us up on Facebook, Public Higher Education Workers Network. And in those meetings, I'm hearing just the most terrible things ever, right? Like faculty across the country. Someone today who is a well-known professor just had their entire program shut down, right, because of the COVID issues. Others are being, at CUNY, for example, the City University of New York, 2,800 adjunct faculty members laid off. So I hear that simultaneously, and the struggles that, they're taking up and how to organize around that. But at the same time, at Westchester, we've been able to continue to have our enrollment increases and move online very quickly. And it feels difficult to balance both wanting to support and stand in solidarity, not only with, the people who join me every week with FEW, but also all of the 14 state universities in Pennsylvania. Cheney University, for example, also not online yet, and has tons of issues, regarding their management, and they're, just 10 miles away from our campus. So it's difficult to, I think, operate from this position of feeling at the same time very, very privileged to be in a more safe position and recognize that I do not have to consider my safety, the safety of my family, and going to work in the fall, but also recognizing that I can perhaps use that position of privilege to support others and hopefully work for their benefit in some way.
I mean, have you find before you led up to, before Westchester basically made the call and said that they're going all online, how would you describe just the feeling among the faculty, at least faculty that you're kind of connected with, about the prospect of going back to face-to-face classes in the fall?
Well, it was tense, I'll say, to say the least. We had a union chapter meeting on Zoom, and first time ever I've seen nearly 400 people on a Zoom call. It was a large portion of our overall faculty body, and there were just so many questions. And this was after, we had already gotten like a good amount of information about like what the fall plan would look like from the administration. There was just so much, I'll say energy, because I don't feel like that's a negative thing, right? Like to me, that feels like something, really important could happen there. There was just an overwhelming amount of energy. I had never felt that since the strike in 2016. But, I think that moment was really the moment at which our union leadership at Westchester was able to, kind of take that energy to the administration and really bring those concerns to light. I think it was a shock to everyone that people were so frustrated and so worried, about what this would look like.
Right. So this was not just like a situation where you have like a benevolent kind of administration that sits there and looks back at the science of things and decides, comes to you as the faculty and says, by the way, before anybody worries about this, I want to let you know we're doing the best for everybody here. But you got some pushback from the faculty from the get-go.
I mean, I can't say what was going on in those closed door meetings because they are very closed door, but it definitely felt like that amount of energy and anger and that was definitely a turning point for what came. And I think also our position of being being one of the more stable state universities, I think that let the decision to go online be much easier because we don't have to worry as much about the financials that a lot of our sister institutions have to worry about.
Exactly, which brings me to my to my hometown, or my home place of work is Kutztown University, and so Tabitha. Now we are one of the universities. Kutztown is one of the universities that is still planning on going to face. There's been a lot of faculty kind of like organizing over the summer, both trying to push both gently and kind of a little bit more aggressively to try to make the point that we really need to be all online, like especially as we see like 9 of the 14 schools are now mostly online. So that's actually happening. And then just this afternoon, right? I mean, faculty are organizing. You have this open letter that went out today. And as that, shortly after that letter was posted, I checked the timestamps. It's about an hour after that letter, the open letter was posted and asking people to sign on to this. President Hawkinson of Kutztown University comes out and gives this YouTube rant of doubling down on the kind of necessity, and he uses coal miners and farmers as a justification to have the grit that we have to stand tough and defeat this virus. I mean, it was incredible to me. So, I mean, after hearing, like, say, the experience of Westchester, and I should add to that, as Dana said, is that Westchester has been one of those universities that has been more stable in the state system, where Kutztown, I mean, I've heard about Kutztown crisis as long as I've been there. And, I've reported on this stuff as part of the reasons I started Raging Chicken, to talk about the absolute nonsense with the budgeting and the numbers were there. But Kutztown has announced that they're planning to look at retrenchment going into the fall. So as a kind of, in a sense, contrast, let us a little bit about kind of what this has been like on the campus at Kutztown over the summer as we start getting closer and closer, to the opening up of the university.
Well, we're all doing a lot of work. I mean, right now has been actually a really busy time for a lot of us. One of the challenges of waiting, even if they do ultimately decide to go online, waiting so long to go online, is that it becomes an incredible challenge for both faculty and for students and their families. Right now, we have people who are investing money and time in buying things they need to move on campus. Are we going to wait until it gets to the very point when people have already spent this money? We have students who, if they're going to be online, they're going to need laptops, they're going to need Wi-Fi access. And in terms of trying to plan as a faculty member, it is incredibly difficult to plan your courses when you're being told they're face-to-face, but they also have to have an online component that has to be evidently a simultaneous online component. It becomes very, very challenging. I know I've been trying to work on my courses, and when you're not just somebody who lectures and you have students doing group activities
right.
and doing projects, it's pretty much impossible to plan to teach in the way that would pretty much be the only way you could teach. I mean, really, it would have to be lecture. The students who are on Zoom at home would be pure spectators. They wouldn't really be able to participate. It will be difficult to even hear people in a class conversation because everyone has to wear a mask. So, it just makes more sense pedagogically in most cases to go online, where you can do things like have them get together in groups and
right.
have discussions in a much more fluid way. So at this point, we know the only safe thing to do is to not come back in person, or if there is any in-person component, for it to be as limited as possible. I know some schools have gone to 80% online, with only evidently courses that absolutely cannot be taught online happening in person. Nothing like that has even been suggested. So we're finally at the point where we need to not only gather the support of other faculty, but students, staff, alumni, our community. So I live in Kutztown as well as teaching at the university. And one of the big concerns is that we're going to suddenly have an influx of all of these students who, they're going to be living in congregate living settings.
Right.
They're not going to have ongoing testing. There really is no plan for contact tracing. And they'll be out in the community. And honestly, what we see is an outbreak not only happening on campus, but also in the surrounding community. So as of right now, I actually have the real-time data right in front of me for the open letter. We have currently 339 people who've already signed the letter. At this point, that's only been out for a few hours, right? So within a few hours, we already are moving toward the 350 mark. And so that tells you something. And when I'm looking at it, it is a range of people from, faculty, of course, students, lots of alumni, a number of community members, a number of people who are in solidarity with us at other PASHE institutions that have already decided to go online. So there is broad support for this. And if you get the chance to look at it, we made 15 points of, where we are seeing problems with this reopening plan, and we go through them, one by one. And like I said, we've had so far something that's only been out for a few hours, we've had overwhelming support that, is continuing to flow in.
Yeah, let me just run through a couple of some few of these kind of quickly so people can get it. Now, I put it in the chat over here. I put a link where you can actually kind of go in there. I think you're going to have to actually copy the link and paste it, but it will be in the show notes afterwards. So link directly to this open letter that you can sign on to as well. Right. So it was like, despite the common practice throughout the country, Kutztown University has no plans to use healthcare questionnaires for faculty, staff, or students. Despite CDC recommendations, Kutztown University has not provided temperature checks for faculty, staff, and students. Kutztown University has no meaningful plans for contact tracing, isolation, campus notification for students, faculty, or staff. Although it has been adopted by many colleges and universities, Kutztown University does not provide COVID-19 testing for students. Although in May 2020, the CDC recommended COVID-19 testing for workers in, quote, congregate living settings. That's actually in the recommendations. Kutztown University will not do that. On July 1st, 2020, Pennsylvania Department of Health issued an order requiring universal face coverings. However, Kutztown University does not provide faculty with the authority to enforce that order. To date, Kutztown University has not provided proper PPE to faculty, staff, and students. CDC recommends continuing cleaning of high-touch surfaces. Who the hell is going to do that with a third of the custodial staff laid off? That's not what it says in there. I'm paraphrasing at this point. But it goes on for there, right? It has to do, the Kutztown University's plan to further marginalize the students, faculty, and staff of color who may be disproportionately affected by COVID-19. According to the CDC, discrimination, healthcare access and utilization, occupation, education, income gaps, wealth gaps, and housing factors have resulted in communities of color being impacted more severely by the pandemic. The university has failure to address these concerns, right? The main website for the disability services at Kutztown University has no advice or guidelines for students with disability. And there's a wide range of concerns, right? And I think I have the sound for this too. Let me just do a little sound here. This was from, this was Kenneth Hawkinson, President Hawkinson's response to this as part of his YouTube thing. Here, wait.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Okay, that wasn't him. That was Shrek. But I must have had the wrong sound drop here, but they seem so similar. But that's kind of where we're at. And not to make light of it, but I mean, you look at what the plan is. So on the one hand, you get faculty pushback. Right. Faculty pushback at Westchester and some discussions, and then you see them early on making this shift. And I mean, how do you even begin to account for this absolute stubbornness and this kind of insistence upon going back in the fall? I mean, what are those discussions like, Tabitha?
It's frustrating. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, I have been part of a lot of these conversations that have happened, and I could tell you our union has been going to bat for the entire community, pushing what we know has to be in place, and over and over again, it's just this is something that can't be done, or we get not a real answer. That happens more often than not. We'll just kind of get a non-answer. So it is frustrating. And now that we're at the point, it's August. We're supposed to start in a few weeks.
Right.
This has been going on for the entire summer. It's been very clear what needs to happen according to the CDC guidelines. And at this point, they're just not being followed. So I think, before taking things public, we did everything that we could possibly do, without making it a spectacle, right? At this point, with us going back in a few weeks, we have no choice but to make this public, and to enlist the rest of the community in this effort, because otherwise what we are looking at, if you'll look at our letter, you'll notice the title for it is the acceptable number of deaths is 0.
There you go.
And that's the bottom line. And if we're not following a safe plan, there will be people who die. I mean, we know this. We are going to have people who get sick. We are going to have, even people who don't have underlying conditions. We know there are plenty of cases where people didn't have underlying conditions and they still don't have favorable outcomes. Even people who recover from it. We know there are people who have lasting heart and lung problems as a result. So they are essentially asking us to risk our lives, to risk, possible health complications in the future. And they're putting the broader community at risk out here. So I think that there is no choice right now but to be very public and open and to talk about this, and to make it clear what's really happening. Because if we don't say something and we just allow the university to put their official position out there, people aren't really reading the reopening plan carefully,
right?
Then I think there's not going to be a lot of awareness of the situation. It might just look like, the faculty are nervous and don't want to go back in, despite precautions being taken, and that's not the case at all. The precautions are not happening. Even if there were a way to go back face to face, which through, we've had people who've done statistical modeling that shows that there really isn't a safe way to make that happen. But, even if there were a safer way to make this happen, that's not happening either. So at this point, we just have no choice but to be open about this, to talk about this, to get it out in the community and let people know what's really going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the modeling you're talking about, there's this great YouTube video by one of our faculty, Dale Parson, which I've actually been, we've been trying to coordinate and get him on the show for an interview to talk a little bit about this modeling stuff, where he did that a while ago, right? Mm-hmm. As a way to kind of like underscore this. So one of the things, and Dana, I'm curious about this. I know from our perspective, say my perspective and faculty that I've spoken to, is that I don't know a single faculty member that is excited, right, enthusiastic about going to online instruction in the fall. And I know that a lot of faculty have waited as long as we could be, because we know the importance of being there one-on-one with students, being in the classroom. But when you have, say, other faculty members or community members or administrator or whoever it might be raise this question about, say, but the students want to get back and you need to get in there for your students, or that, maybe the faculty want to go online because they don't care about your students. I mean, how do you respond to that stuff?
Obviously we care about our students, right? I'm sorry, I heard somebody else jumping in there. Right now we know that it's young adults can be at risk,
right,
for this. And there have been deaths of young adults. And first and foremost, we're looking at the safety of everyone. And then second, making sure we can deliver good instruction. And as I briefly explained before, trying to do face-to-face and online at the same time with everybody distanced in the classroom and unable to do any kind of real group discussion or group work is not really going to be what best meets our students' needs.
Right. So Dana, what's that discussion like at Westchester?
I'll just second what Tabitha said. Both Tabitha and I are in the field of education, right? So we teach future teachers, and this is happening both in K-12 and higher ed, which is, a divisionary tactic to really push students and their teachers apart. But I think we should actually talk to our students. I sent out a survey, to my students saying, how do you feel about all this? And it was incredibly mixed, it is not, I challenge, administrators to show us the data that students want to go back, particularly if it is in this format where we're 6 feet apart, behind masks, as Tabitha said, can't interact, can't do group work. It's not normal, right?
Right.
It's not education as normal. And I think, at Westchester, what we're trying to do is, recognize that we're online. What can we do to make, the educational experience as best as possible? But because we know what's happening, because we know the format is online, we can actually make those pedagogical decisions and, prepare for our classes. What our, colleagues at Kutztown and other places are going through is complete uncertainty. And I don't know, every educator out there will say the uncertain is the biggest challenge you have to deal with, is just not knowing what's coming up. So, I would say at Westchester, we have a lot of faculty who are now turning all of their attention and energy to making sure that the fall semester can be as meaningful, as personal as possible, given the online setting.
Absolutely. And I want to get, kind of flip the script. And I think Madeline's already a step ahead of me here because I wanted to kind of, see it from that other side. I mean, obviously, Madeline, I'm not asking you to speak for every student that's out there. I mean, it's, obviously, but, from kind of where you sit, what's this like from a student's perspective? I mean, I could imagine, I've heard from personally from some of my students who, they're torn, I think kind of like we are in some ways, but torn on the one hand is like, they love college, right? They love being at college. They want to be there. They want to be in the classroom. And they're, but at the same time, they're not necessarily willing to put their lives in line for it. So I'm curious kind of from your angle, what's this been like coming at it from as a student?
Yeah, I feel like it kind of, I'm also experiencing mixed emotions. Like I am excited. So Villanova is opening and they're going to be on.
Oh, they are opening. I didn't realize that.
Yes, they're going to be opening and they're offering different types of classes like 100% in person, hybrid classes, and then this thing called simulcast. I have no idea what that means.
That's what they're trying to do at Kutztown, yeah.
Yeah, but just kind of goes to show like it's not completely organized. So that's concerning, but I like just being home for so long and like being through this quarantine and like having to adapt to this new lifestyle has been hard but very necessary. So part of me is excited to go back to be away from home for once, but also at what cost, like was said earlier, people are bound to get sick and there are deaths are to be expected from schools reopening, whether it's someone on campus or someone's families that they go back to in November. So I feel like the safest thing, like was said, was to only have necessary people on campus, like people who are taking like courses that require face-to-face contact, like labs or certain classes like that, because I feel like students, both administrators and students are kind of holding on to what a college experience should be and not really like changing with what needs to be done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes 100% sense.
Yeah. So, and I feel like will the college experience, quote unquote college experience, be the same because of this? And we have seen just through how classes became remote so suddenly this past like spring that things can be done remotely. So there's not always a need to be on campus, which can be good and bad because like the face-to-face contact is everything, at least for me, when it comes to like learning. So, and as I'm a student of education, so I'm going to be a teacher hopefully after next spring. And so just like thinking about what that's going to look like for me is also kind of giving me mixed emotions, because we know what we're capable now of as a society now when it comes to like having things remote, but also like what does that mean for like the future of education, I would say. So sorry to like kind of go off track, but
no
I guess so I guess my like view of this is, yes, I'm excited, but also I think that we have to be stricter. Like it's not just our emotions or like our own excitedness that should compel us to go to campus, but we should really think about the community at large. Like how far do the effects of this reopening go? It doesn't just stay within this community, within our school, within our families. It extends to whoever our family has in contact with. So I feel like the repercussions are way bigger than we are thinking of, or at least this big decision makers are thinking of.
Right. One of the things I want to come back to this. I want to talk about a little stuff so we can open up the place for calls. One, I want to make a note. If anybody's watching on YouTube, I want to apologize. I notice that we're having some issues with the stream. I think that has everything to do with my son's gaming addiction. So I apologize for that. But you can kick on over to the Podbean app or pick this up in our regular podcast stream. This will be rebroadcast as a part of our regular podcast stream. So I apologize to the folks that are tuning in on YouTube for that. I wanted to basically say, we're at the point, I know we have 3 guests on tonight, which is more than we usually have. So giving a little bit kind of longer time, because I know there's some people that might want to call in. And so if you want to call in, this is a great time that you can call in. You can do that at the bottom of the Podbean app, and you can kind of click call in if you've got something to say, contribution. You want to give us a perspective about what things are like on the ground from where you're at. That would be fantastic. I want to also mention that Area 81 was in here, and he basically was talking about his son's out in California, right? We'll be starting school next week, and their school district is done up to 100%. Not sure exactly how it's going to happen at the right end. I know that's been my experience with my kids too as well. We don't know how they're going back to school either. And I want to kind of shout out to, I've got a couple calls into people that we look to have either next week or the week after. We're going to have the focus will be on K through 12, and we got some folks at K through 12 educators that are organizing there, and to kind of really dig down into that right as we're kind of getting ready to getting ready to go into the meat grinder, it feels like. But so one of the things that anybody wants to call in, feel free to call in now. It'd be a great time to pick up your call. Also want to say, if you want to help support this podcast and Raging Chicken Media and our other podcast, you can go to patreon.com/rcpress. You can become a member of the show for as little as $5 a month, and get access to kind of special content. You'll get especially access to kind of early trials on, for example, this live stream. We actually kind of tested it out with our members first to get some feedback and what was happening in the community. So you can go to patreon.com/rcpress. You become a member as little as $5 a month. You can also go down to the bottom of the Podbean app. If you're listening to the Podbean app, and there's this little gift icon there, you can click that icon and you can actually, leave us a little tip, right? By purchasing these golden beans, I guess Podbean is calling them. And you could send us a little gift or a bigger gift or whatever it might be. But anything that you can do to help support this podcast is great, because we want to bring you this content weekly and in ways that you're not going to hear in other places. So that's going to be kind of important. So as we're waiting to see if anybody has any comments or anyone have calls, you want to jump in, feel free to call in now. But I want to just open this one up a little bit for kind of coming off what Madeline just was talking about. And one of the things, thank you, Area 51. I appreciate it. Just send us a coffee cup, a little cup of coffee. I appreciate the gift. That's awesome. But talking about the college experience, and one of the things that one of my kind of pitches to people has been, we're trying to explain what's happening at Kutztown University, is I could remember years ago when the university was investing hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars in campus beautification, like the improvements of the aesthetics of the building, new signage. I can remember President Cevallos, the previous president of the University of Kutztown, was so keen on this new signage. And we're sitting there as faculty, among the union, looking at them like, man, I've never seen them so excited about anything in their life. They're talking about signage, right? And they were excited about that stuff, campus beautification. And so many college campuses have started to say, look, we're not here for academics. We're not here to educate. We're here to give you a college experience. And I don't want to belittle that entirely, because I remember as a kid who my number one goal growing up in Utica, New York, was to get the hell out of there. Right. To get out of that space and get into a space that kind of felt like it was more nurturing to me. And I understand the idea about going to a place and feeling like it's home, and that experience being absolutely critically important. But campus administrators have increasingly said, yeah, you know what? We don't need to invest so much in academics. What we need to invest in is the infrastructure and the plants and the trees, right? We need to plant 500 swamp white oaks instead of invest in kind of building the program or ensuring these classes are adequately staffed. So I just, that whole idea, and I think that's what's happening at Kutztown right now. They are so invested in that PR branding image of the university and selling the experience that when it comes down to actually have to talk about the importance of academics and how we do something that's pedagogically sound, they can't get their heads out of their asses of that particular brand experiment they're going on. So I'll just kind of open it up to you three about, what's your takes on that?
I can. So sorry.
Great. Yeah, no, great. Hop in, Madeline.
Yes.
Okay, this is a small thing. So, when we talk about the college experience and how that could change, I feel like I thought it came to my head was so we talk about faculty perspective kind of being left in the dark, student perspective being left in the dark, workers perspective being left in the dark when it comes to reopening. Yes. And what college will look like in the fall. And I feel like the college experience going forward should be decided by everyone in the community, which is like kind of going back to what Dana and Tabitha both said about making this issue public.
Yep.
I feel like now more than ever, we should be shaping what should be done, what the accommodation should be made, since we are part of the community too. We're the ones being at risk here. So it's up to us to use our voices now more than ever, even though like organizing in the pandemic can slow down activism and can slow down like people's energy to reach out to others, even though they're not meeting in person. Now is like, I would say, pressing time more than ever, because I feel like universities are, as y'all would agree, I would assume, universities are taking shortcuts in order to offset the economic effects that they have experienced due to the pandemic. And I feel like us not saying something or not organizing around this will just set precedent for the future to come and how they will shape the beautification of the college experience, like you were talking about, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
It's like now more than ever is, but I think that's my lasting like message is like, now just because we're not in person does not mean activism should slow down as well. It's calling for a deeper type of activism because we are not together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna just add,
Go ahead, Dana. Yeah.
I'm a former student of Westchester University, so I have this really interesting, experience of seeing the campus kind of like before the transition, before the the big push to have a Starbucks and a Chick-fil-A and all a rock wall and all of this kind of stuff that was happening. But what jumps out to me most is that I think over the past 20 years or so, we've been kind of pushed into making these decisions, right? Where it's either like you have some good experiences at campus, or we cut, or we have programs that are meaningful and have full-time faculty members and all of that stuff. And I think that we're being given a false dichotomy in a lot of ways, particularly at our state institutions, because we're essentially turning to students and saying to them, well, you could have faculty members that are there for you and not hopping around to Delaware County Community College and then Philadelphia Community College and then running to Penn State to teach classes, or you can have livable dorms, and a dorm room with an air conditioner, which is
right.
Not always available before that. And I think that's, just because we've had this tremendous lack of state funding that, particularly in Pennsylvania, our students leave with a ton of student loan debt, the most in the entire country. And that's because we, as Madeline was saying, we, the collective community of our schools, have not been the ones making those decisions. We've not been the ones making the decisions about what gets funded in our institutions. We've not been the ones who are making the decisions about how our institutions are funded at the state level. And so more of that burden is being pushed onto students as consumers and at the expense of academic experiences that can be enriching. I mean, right now we have on the table just an awful plan to do God knows what to merge a lot of our state universities,
right.
Cutting programs. This is coming from the chancellor's office. Cutting programs, making students share faculty across campuses, and most of that will require going online.
Right.
So on the one hand, we're hearing from administrators that students want and need this college experience. On the other hand, they're telling us that some students, and that typically means students who won't have the financial means to do otherwise, will need to share faculty members across campuses and share programs. And so I think we have, the conversation needs to be changed. We can't let administrations be the ones who are defining the conversations. You have access to a Starbucks and air conditioning in your dorms, or you have these programs. No, we should be the ones deciding what we want for our colleges and universities.
Oh, that's awesome. And this is precisely the kind of struggle that the public higher education workers, is all about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we really have been meeting for well over a year, but once the COVID crisis hit, we started meeting weekly. It was necessary, right? And we have 5 principles that guide a lot of our work. We believe that public higher education is a necessary right that people deserve. And we believe that the communities who these institutions serve should be the ones that are making those decisions. So most of our work is trying to either help faculty members, staff, and students on all of these campuses across the country really work together, organize, sometimes against administrations, sometimes against lackluster faculty unions, whatever that might be, to make our institutions what we want them to be.
Awesome. So I'm curious where you sit on this conversation now, Tabitha.
So as I'm listening in, more broadly, thinking about what that experience, what does it mean to have a meaningful experience across the board? Number one should be getting your educational experience, of course, having the program that you need, having the classes that you need so that you can graduate, having relationships with your professors. But beyond that, I think this semester, I'm not going to discount, the fun of college, of course. I enjoyed college. I enjoyed getting to socialize and make friends. And those things are critical to development of a young person. But when we're talking about what this semester is going to look like, that won't be able to happen anyways, right? So they're going to be spending time essentially in their dorm room or in class, not able to have the kind of social events you would typically have, not really able to interact with people outside of their bubble. We're talking about not even being able to do group activities in a classroom. So it seems to me that despite bringing students on campus, this plan really isn't going to give them those experiences. They're not going to be able to safely have any of those experiences. In fact, all of those things that make college fun and social are the things they're just not going to even be able to do, that they're not going to be allowed to do. So I feel like there is kind of, again, this false narrative being displayed where, students will lose out on this experience if we go online this semester, when they're not going to be able to have that experience anyways. They're going to be coming into, unfortunately, we'll feel probably anybody who watches the show Black Mirror, kind of dystopian type of setting where, we'll be dressed in PPE and, separated from one another and try to, have cameras in the classroom to allow people to watch as spectators at home, whatever that might look like. But that typical college experience is not going to happen regardless this semester. So what we are looking at is, I hate to put it this way, whether or not students are paying for the dorms and exposing themselves and their families and their community to this illness, or whether we're making the right choice saying, unfortunately, these experiences are not going to be able to happen this semester at least. And so let us be safe. Let us make sure our students still get their educational needs met. And, we will unfortunately have to deal with the fact that the social piece is not going to happen in the same way this semester, whichever route we go.
Yeah, and I think, my wife was putting it like this to me like the other night when she was about some of the conversations that she was having with people. She was saying look, you got to understand, this is this is the period of time that our kids, right, and our grandkids are going to be reading history books about, right? And it was just a great way in my own mind to kind of thinking about how to communicate that with people. It's this is no longer normal, right? There is not going to be the normal, and we're going to have to deal with the grief around that. Because there's a serious loss there. I feel it every single day. And I if I was a college student today, I know that would be weighing on me so heavily, right? And what I like the way that, what Madeline was saying and Danny are talking about, making this public, and then actually we all need to be making decisions about this. It brings me back to the strike in 2016. Is that was one of the first times in probably a decade at my time at Kutztown that I felt that possibility when we as students and faculty and staff, we had people from the community coming in, and we were actually having real conversations about what it means to have higher education, what this space should be about, who should be deciding about kind of like our discussions about planning the way that the campus should look. It's like, and it was like this moment of like collective decision making, right? And again, and it's been a grief process of my own. I'll be put my cards on the table to seeing that slowly fade away, right? To move back into a situation where we have the administration who looks at, the education part of college as simply like the check sheet and making sure students have these classes, as opposed to actually focusing on those relationships, those kind of like the educational relationships, which we're always, and I mean that both inside the classroom and outside the classroom, between students and faculty and the community, all that stuff, student organizations, all that stuff which made up the educational environment that made college and higher education feel special, to me at least, right? It was the kind of thing that felt very much where I could see a different version of myself within that. And the faculty members that I always kind of look back and kind of support, and the other people that I worked with. I worked at the Carrier Dome for like 35 hours a week when I was an undergrad. And the people that I worked with, that all became kind of part of that. And, it feels like that when we got to that strike, it was reminded us, yeah, we can have these really amazing conversations about possibilities, right? Amazing conversations about where we want this to go. After COVID-19, do we want to go back to like the normal, or can we do better? And I think we can do better. That's my little diatribe at the end.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think we can do better too. And I think this is where, despite the grief and the challenges that we're facing right now, and the fact that, this isn't normal, right? They keep saying the new normal. This isn't normal. We know it's not normal. But hopefully, despite the fact that we can't be together in person, we still are keeping that sense of community. And I think that we have found ways to use the technology to maintain that and to ensure that happens, and to make sure people still feel supported. And that's where we really should be focusing our efforts right now. How do we make sure that even if we're physically distanced, we don't feel socially distanced? Yeah. And if we put more of our effort into that for now, I think we're going to have much better outcomes than trying to force a situation that is not only going to be dangerous, it's not really going to be conducive to education.
100%.
Could I also add that,
please?
I just think it's so inspiring that, you're all saying, we can do better. I agree. But I would just add that I think we have to. Like, I don't even know if it's off the table for us to, not take this opportunity, not take this moment and say we can't go back to what was. You know what I mean? I think we need to recognize that, each year that passes, we have more millions and millions of dollars in student debt. We have fewer and fewer faculty with livable wages. We have, less accessible institutions of higher education. And I think we have to make sure that this moment is not a moment where we are, fighting for crumbs, and instead, potentially re-envisioning what it should be. With that many people in an uproar right now, it has to be the time.
Yeah, I would also like to add something real quick.
Go, Madeline. Yeah.
It's just I feel like this time, it's I've reflected a lot about what is life essentially, what is happening right now,
right?
And kind of relating to what everyone was basically saying about what are we gonna go what's after this? Are we gonna go back to what was normal? And like Dana said, we can't. There is no option. That should not be an option at all, because I feel even though 2020 has been very uncertain, we haven't been prepared for what 2020 brought to us. I feel I don't want to say it was meant to be this way, because we were not meant to suffer this way.
Right.
But I feel it challenged us to see where we should be going from here. We should not the way that we were living before, the way that we were letting like our universities kind of sidestep their accountability, and it's especially evident now. I feel like 2020 offered that opportunity to see more clearly, how systems and institutions have failed us. Even though it's been obvious for many people for a long time, I feel like now it's been an awakening for others, which I think is needed in order to like improve from here, like we all kind of said. So, and like even like not just in the pandemic sense, but also in the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter protest, we can't go back from there. How are we going to be better from this? Like society as a whole has to change, not just like in terms of everything. I'm speaking more theoretical, which is like kind of a sticky place to go. But yeah, I'm just saying like this year has showed us now more than ever that we cannot go back. We have to do something differently because obviously it's not working.
I just want to jump in on what Madeline was saying there. I think what she's getting at is systemic problems require systemic change. And this year, we have seen where the systemic problems are. And now it's time for the hard part, which is the systemic change.
100%. So we're kind of nearing the kind of close out of the show. So one of the things I like to go do kind of a quick take here. We've got priorities and plugs. So if you want to say, what do you think kind of going forward from this point, kind of looking forward in terms of organizing in higher ed? What would you see as kind of like a key priority? And secondly, is there anything you want to plug at this point? Because one, I definitely want to give Madeline, I want to give you a shot to some space to talk a little about the USAS summer, the summer stuff for that, but also kind of want to plug particular events or particular things that move people from kind of this conversation into kind of point them towards kind of actions or things that they can do. So priorities and plugs. Who'd like to start us off? How about we go to Madeline?
Okay. Yeah, I could start. So one is the United States to Get Sweatshops is having their annual summer conference, but now it's moving to virtual like atmosphere because obviously the pandemic. But this is a great chance for students anywhere, like college students anywhere, to gain organizing tools, like how to run campaigns on their campus, similar to like the one that Kutztown is running, in order to have more transparency and more like a better reopening plan, to having like being in support of workers. It could be anything that's the community wants, essentially. So any like trainings regarding that, and also USAS is like really focusing on how to be anti-racist and how to make our spaces more anti-racist, because racism infiltrates even the most like quote unquote progressive spaces, because we live in a racialized society. And so we're like trying to focus our efforts on that because racism touches every part of society. So I think that would be very healthy for our organization and for future organizers who would want to join USAS. So that's on the weekend of August 22nd. And you can register by going to the USAS website, which I can post in this chat. I just posted it. So yeah, if anyone has any idea of like students they think would be interested, or faculty who would want to, also faculty can come too. So it's open to anybody. So if you would want to pass on like the link or pass on the message, that'd be great. And if you have any questions, you can also reach out to me. I don't know if you want me to put my email in here. Or
yeah, sure. If you want, I could definitely you put it in here, and I could include it in the show notes too as well if you like. Okay,
cool. I'll send it in here. And Kevin, I'm not sure if you wanted to plug what Kutztown is doing regarding the Healthy Campus Bill of Rights, or if you want me to plug that.
Oh, you can plug it. I'll plug it too as well before we go. But you're welcome to hop in there too. Absolutely.
Oh no, you can plug it if you're going to anyway.
Sure. Awesome. Good. Dana, how about you?
Okay, so I would say there's a couple of, I'm going to give a shout out to K-12 and then also some stuff that's going on with FEW. So in Philly, they are working to make sure that the back to school plan going remote is equitable. Today, there were actions at 8 a.m. in front of the district office, at 3 p.m. in front of the Comcast building. Not all students have access to technology. Not all students have access to wireless internet service. And they're fighting the good fight. So if everyone is interested in supporting that effort, you can follow the Racial Justice Organizing Committee, the Caucus of Working Educators, our city, our schools, all organizations that had actions today. And then if you are a higher education worker and are interested in organizing on your campus to have more democratic, transparent, fighting unions, to have equitable public higher education, you can follow the FEW Network, Public Higher Education Workers, on Facebook and Twitter. We meet every Wednesday. We also have been having webinars. We don't just like sit around and complain, I think, which is really important.
Yes.
We really share strategies, tactics, organizing wins. You will come away, if you're trying to become an organizer, to organize colleagues, to organize with your coworkers, whoever, you will come away with lessons and strategies, tactics, things that others have been doing all across the country, successfully and not, right? Like we have to learn from losses as well. But we do that every week. So if you're interested in doing that and you'd like some support, maybe you're the only person right now and you want to figure out how to not be the only person, come talk to us. We're there to support. So thanks.
Awesome. Tabitha, let's go to you.
I think the biggest thing is finding like-minded people who also see the changes that need to happen and to start having those conversations. I mean, these are things that we can start doing now. We can use this opportunity to think about how we can use tools like social media, like Zoom, other platforms that allow us to be in contact with one another, to just start having those conversations about what does it look like to have an inclusive and safe community where everybody gets what they need. I think having conversations about what equity looks like is going to be crucial. So Dana pointed out that we do go online, we need to make sure everybody has access to the appropriate technology. So it's not as simple as saying, oh, well, we've got the university to go online, now we're done. Well, is everybody getting what they need so that they can be successful in that environment? To be mindful of, for example, students who may need, if most students are going to be home and we have some students on the dorm, allow those to be the students who, for example, might come from foster home situations and might not have a place to go back to.
Yep.
Or students, our LGBTQ students, who sometimes may not be in safe situations at home, to create those spaces where we're still taking care of everybody in our community. And going forward, thinking about long-term, what does it mean to have this supportive community, to have this place where everybody feels that they are valued, that they are worthy, that they are listened to, that they are heard. And I think the only way that's going to happen is if we have a lot of people having those conversations and then creating concrete plans that we can move forward.
Absolutely. That is so awesome. And I agree 100%. This is, moving forward, one of the things that I'll say that, with the Healthy Campus Bill of Rights, which literally just started getting off its started to walk from crawling, right? Before the pandemic hit. Is that one of the things behind that kind of initiative was the idea that there were students, that there were faculty, that there were staff members, even community members who were fighting like these fights at the university, whether it's to kind of gain access to psychological services at the university. Was it to make sure that you're not going to be subjected to abuse on the job? Was it make sure that you're not going to be faced discrimination in employment, right? Based upon your sexuality, by your race, by your kind of like your identity or your kind of national origin, right? Was to make sure that we had these kind of protections for undocumented students, right, who are at our university. There's a whole range of stuff that's on there, and beginning to think about this comprehensive way of looking, just one site, right, to begin to kind of site to address some of these things with the recognition that so much needs to happen. And right now, we're obviously kind of focused directly upon what's going on with the back to school stuff. But one of the reasons of thinking about that idea about priorities is because, yes, I want to fight this fight right now when we're talking about fighting the fighting the university about back to school plans, forcing us into the meat grinder. But I also want us to think beyond that, right? That whole idea about where do we want to be, right? And it's interesting that this is happening at a point in history for those of us who are like, cannot wait for the opportunity to kind of like to get Trump out of office, for example, right? We have no delusions about going back to some kind of normal. At least I certainly don't. And the idea there is like, I heard this a couple of people discussing this. I was on like the podcast I listened to, the Majority Report. There was a guest was on, was talking about this. And I think it was a very apt way of kind of thinking about this. It's like, both in terms of Trump, right? The idea was that he is the acute condition, right? That we have to address the acute condition now, right? So that we don't die, right? But if Biden gets elected to office, right, that is, yes, it's not the acute condition, but that's the persistent condition, right? That's the underlying condition that we have to be adjusted. So our imagination has to go beyond that. And it seems interesting to me, at least from where I sit thinking about this back to school, like, see this in the fight for like, holy crap, we got to make sure people are okay. Right. As much as, I want to get back to the classroom so badly, but in order to do that in any way that is meaningful, people have to be safe. Right. And so we got to address that. That's the acute condition. Right. But the persistent one, the underlying condition, is everything that brought us to this point. Like the degradation of higher education, the degradation of our community, the kind of like the commodification of higher education, the profitization of this, the turning the education into nothing but something that is exchanged on stock markets. Come on. And in the light of what's been happening in this country over the past 4 years, but even this past year, in the assassination, the police assassination of George Floyd, for example, and the movement that has grown out of that is not disconnected from going back to campus. That has to be integral to going back to campus. And so part of the questions, and you're going to hear this on this live show, you're going to hear this on a regular podcast on a weekly basis, that we are in the position, that's what we want to be asking. We want to be talking about on what conditions do we go back? And if those conditions are not met, right, what are we prepared to do about it? And which is why I wanted to have, these folks on tonight too, like just amazing organizers. I want to thank Madeline. I want to thank Dana. I want to thank Tabitha for joining me tonight. And I want to thank all of you for kind of tuning in. Vic, I saw you try to call in. I'm sorry, we're just kind of hitting kind of the end of the show. We will be here every Monday night at 7 p.m. though. If you want to check out the show next week, that'd be great. Yeah, great. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah,
thank
thanks
you
for
so
having
much.
me. Yeah, it's also great to hear from you two, Dana and Tabitha, and also you, Kevin. I always love hearing, and like I feel like I learned a lot from this podcast.
Go be an amazing teacher, Madeline. Seriously.
Absolutely.
Wow, thank you so much.
We need you.
It was great having you on, Madeline, too, because I think it's so important to have the student voices heard. A lot of us who are faculty have been out there and talking, and I feel like there hasn't been enough opportunity to hear from our students. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective tonight. I think it's really critical to have your voice heard.
Yeah, of course. And just like, thanks for facilitating space. Like if you probably are in your classrooms or virtual classrooms, facilitating that space for student voice to be heard. So that goes a long way. Like students can use their voices, but it's way different when someone facilitates that space to help us too.
Awesome. And I know that I don't know if it'll be next week and the week after, but we're going to have another kind of student organizer show. There's some really amazing work that's happening at East Stroudsburg right now with this student solidarity work. They've got this great program called SWORD, which is in support of food service workers up in East Stroudsburg. The woman who's one of the student organizers who is wasn't able to make it tonight. And so we're going to try to schedule that out. We also want to have somebody specifically from the Healthy Campus Bill of Rights to come on and talk about what's happening specifically on Kutztown's campus. And that leaves me with one other plug I want to make tonight, is that on Wednesday, that's August 5th at 6 p.m., the Healthy Campus Bill of Rights will be holding a virtual town hall talking about concerns about the Kutztown University administration's like push to return to face-to-face classes in the fall, and it's an opportunity to organize the plan of action about moving forward. That is open. We do ask that folks just kind of sign in and kind of register for that. I'll put the link will be in the show notes, but it's like bit.ly, if you know the shortened link, bit.ly/ACB HC Town Hall 2. That's all one word, HC Town Hall 2. You can click on that. You can register to kind of join the town hall. We've had a great response. It's HC Town Hall 2 because this is our second town hall. We had a great turnout on the first one. We had great participation from parents, students at Kutztown University. We had some folks join from some of the other campuses. We are welcome to as it being a space to strategize. And this has been really, it's been in many ways, it's been a student-driven campaign to begin with. Madeline has helped in terms of the organizing, and her kind of coming into this has been phenomenal. Some of the organizing that we've helped from a whole range of different facets was great. So please, if you can make it, it's bit.ly, bit.ly, bit.ly/HC Town Hall 2, and that will be Wednesday, August 5th at 6 p.m. and that will be a virtual town hall. And yes, it will be, as Madeline put it, on our new best friend Zoom. It's crazy. So thank you everybody for joining us. And like I said, we were going to have some folks from the K through 12 scenario. One thing I'll ask anybody who's listening to this, and also a view of Madison, Dana, and Tabitha, if you have other people that you have in mind, say, hey, would be someone who would great to have on the show, let me know, because I'd love to reach out to them and kind of continue this movement. And I think that by building our networks in this way, that we can help create and kind of amplify the conversations that we're having in all of our different spaces. So great. Yes. Okay. Then I'll hit you up, Dana, for the K through 12 conversation. Fantastic. All right. So, but just remember, in the immortal words of President Kenneth Hawkinson at Kutztown University,
some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Well, I tell you, that is not something that we believe right here at Raging Chicken, and not something that any of us here on this show believe. So once again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Thanks to Tabitha, Dana, and Madeline. We'll see you next week.
My face, my arms, can't tell if I exist. Am I the sky, the rock, or tree falling in the forest? I had a friend once, at least I think I did. I almost can't remember exactly what a friend is. There are no people in the future. No people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people to call. Where are all my people?
Thank you all again. See y'all.